This is the Thanksgiving weekend, and lots of folks are away, traveling around the country or even out of the country. This is Saturday, and yesterday was Black Friday, and I have an African-American friend who said, no, actually it's called Friday of Color. I prefer to call it Friday of Color. And it's a time when people go out and buy things they don't need for cheap. And it's quite an amazing holiday that we've developed, whereby it's the sale day, and things you didn't know that you needed are now cheaper than ever. So you wind up spending a lot of money buying stuff that, after you finally get it, you get buyer's remorse, and you think, I wonder if I could send it back. No, it's too much trouble. So next year, a year goes by, and some people don't even open those packages that they buy. After all, how many secure digital cards at 32 gigabytes can you buy before your camera you can only use one at a time? So it's an amazing mentality that we developed about this time of the year. And might mention two other mindfulnesses. Tonight we're going to hear about contemplations. And one mindfulness is that this is indeed my mother's birthday, which is a thing of note, and we've been celebrating that today. But and that's significant, certainly, for my life. But when you send the Dharma around the world, as we do with our webcasts and our blogs and such, you realize that Thanksgiving is an American holiday, uniquely American. They don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Canada. They don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Australia. Canada, Turkey Day? No, not that I know of. We don't do Boxing Day. Any Canadians who do Thanksgiving? Any Canadians online who are saying, yes, indeed, we did? I don't think so, Kai. Maybe you can import it up there. American culture goes north. But in Asia, friends in Taiwan who say that Taiwan has totally copied Christmas and Halloween. Halloween is huge in Taiwan. And they have this Taiwanese take on costumes, but certainly not Thanksgiving. So this is definitely our way of doing things. And as such, it remains one of the least commercial of holidays. It's one of the more pure, in that it goes back to a root of gratitude. So that's just where we are in our year, and it's a fine time to dig into the Avatamsaka Sutra, to get the Buddha's voice here as the year turns towards winter. So if you would please turn to page 4 and page 5 in our new manuscript here. This is indeed a work in progress, in the best sense, in that we're translating as we go, we're retranslating as we go, and this is all of a 6-page edition. This is the one we just finished. This is the third ground. So we took us a while to get through that, and we've got a equally large provisional manuscript for the second and the first ground. So we're learning as we go, and when we're done, we should have a brand new version of the 10 grounds, but that will be for a while. So in the meantime, we're adding to our text. So we're on the top of page 4. There are 3 stanzas of 4 lines each, and because we're those of us in the Theravada tradition are adapting a tradition that's been in the world in Pali for some time, and those of us in the Chinese Mahayana are bringing the tradition across from Asia in the Chinese tradition. If we're Vietnamese American Buddhists, then we're adapting the Vietnamese Buddhist culture for the West and for Western culture and people's minds. So we're very much in a bridge process. We're crossing over, going from Asia to the West, and in many interesting ways, going back to Asia as well, having put the Dharma through a filter of Western culture. So that's where we are. As a result of that bridge process, that translation, we honor that by doing the Chinese first and then the English. So I'm going to put my palms together and going to chant with a melody, because these are the verses that were probably recited with the melody to facilitate the memorization and the understanding. So we're going to do that in the Chinese, and then we'll recite together in unison the English as we go. So let's do that. I'll give you a line and you give it back to me. 如是智者如地，如是出地，于百千劫甚难得。我今忽然而得闻。菩萨圣恒妙法音，菩萨圣恒妙法音。Okay, over to the right here. Let's read it together. In 100,000 eons, it is hard to get to hear principles such as these, the grounds of the wise ones. Now our chance has come, and we can hear the wondrous Dharma sound of Bodhisattva's sublime practices. Right. Who's speaking? This is a Bodhisattva whose name is Vajra Treasury of Vajra. And this Bodhisattva is one of many who speak during the process of the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is the Huayan in Chinese, the Keigong Kyo in Japanese, the Avatamsaka Sutra in Sanskrit, and probably translated as Flower Garland Sutra in English. And this Bodhisattva received the Buddha's empowerment, his entrustment to speak the Dharma. So it's interesting that this sutra is not the Buddha's voice per se. And that brings up an interesting other point that maybe people are not aware of, that at least in the Mahayana version of the Buddha's teaching, we're not hearing the Buddha's voice either, we're hearing Ananda's voice. Ananda was the Buddha's cousin and was just a young boy he was just born on the day the Buddha was awakened and so enlightened. So he's much younger than the Buddha, but he's a blood relative and very much taken with his cousin, the Buddha. And so he spent all of his time with the Buddha and had a great memory. He's said to be foremost in memory, foremost in scholarship and learning. And so he heard everything the Buddha said and then passed it on. That's why the sutras begin with, "Thus I have heard," to indicate that it was Ananda speaking and not the Buddha. It was Ananda's memory of what the Buddha said. But equally interesting, if you look back at ancient texts, or if you've studied the Bible or the Quran or the Vedas or any of the ancient religious scriptures that are around, many of them are challenged for the authenticity. People say, well, we don't know exactly how much of the Gospels Jesus actually spoke. So there are questions among scholars, people who look back at the ancient texts, and they use language analysis, Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew and Latin, and to go back and look at the sources of the Gospels, the earliest known versions that we find, and potentially there are more to be found. Maybe the Dead Sea Scrolls was found in a vase in a cave somewhere, in a crockery pot, and somebody was chopping it up and using it as firewood, using it to burn for heat, and someone else was using it to wrap fish in, and it was not recognized as a priceless, the Gospels, the earliest one. But they saved enough of it to verify that this was a very, very old book. And so the challenge came up. How much of that can we say is the words of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John as they talk about Jesus of Nazareth? So what we're talking about is called apocrypha. This is what scholars do, is they trace old things and try to estimate how much is actually traceable back to the source, the founder of the religion. This is a good thing to do for people of that mind, In Buddhism, interestingly enough, there are texts that people say, oh, the Buddha never spoke this, but only a small percentage. By and large, the majority of the sutras in the Mahayana are traced back to this source, which was Ananda. And while some of the more important Mahayana texts through the Sanskrit, kind of the Sanskrit filter, the ones that came to us in Sanskrit, are mostly considered not to have been altered by scribes. That's one of the places they say scribes changed it. People, when they were copying it down, they changed it. Or it was not religious at all. It was a political text. And there are stories certainly in the biblical tradition about texts being suppressed by parties somewhere along the way of us getting to the Bible. Others were promoted by other groups because it forwarded their ambitions. The emperor liked this one and didn't like that one, etc. So all kinds of stories that arise when you look back at something that old. Old books. Among the oldest things we have in our world are sacred texts because people keep them going. Their value is recognized, so we keep them alive. In Buddhism, by and large, that is not the case. Now, as I say that, I realize that there are, among Buddhist traditions themselves, there are people who would say the Lotus Sutra doesn't exist or shouldn't exist. And there are other people who look at other texts and say, well, these were never spoken by the Buddha. But by and large, when the scholars go back and check the authenticity of texts, this is said to be as close as we get to the voice of the Buddha. So, the voice of the Buddha? Nope, not the voice of Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva. So, there we are. Interesting, isn't it? Why all of this murkiness? Why all of this? Why is there so much to say about the actual text? One good reason, a simple one, is it's old. This is really old. Other than the planet itself and the mountains and the woods and the rivers and the weather, what do you have in your world that is 2,500 years old? Not a lot. Another thing you could say that is that old is the Buddhist Sangha, the institution of monks and nuns leaving home to give their lives to the propagation of the Dharma. So the Sangha is a living fossil. It's the longest running fraternity on the planet, pretty much, without question. Monks, men and women, living with the same robes, the same schedule of the day, the same customs, the same organization, the same practices as those practiced in the Buddha's time. How interesting that is, when you go back and think about it. What else in the world is that old? Marriage, men and women coming together. What else? Politics, having people try to govern themselves, that's an old institution. But to have one that is as precise as the Buddhist Sangha is very rare, very special. So let's look at this first stanza and put this all in perspective. What do we have? Let's look at the Chinese. Do you have your text there, page 4? 汝是智者诸地义. In this way, wise ones, meanings of the grounds, plural. Word by word, like this, wisdom one, plural, ground, meaning. Okay? Next, in order to make sense of that, we have to add the next sentence. 于百千劫神难得. There's the verb. 于 in 100, 百 1000, 1000, 劫 kalpas or eons. 身 very 难 difficult. 得 no, to get, to obtain. So we switch the order to make sense of it in English. Second sentence first. So in 100,000 eons, it's really hard to get the meanings of the grounds of those with wisdom, of the wise ones. In 100,000 eons, it's hard to get to hear principles such as these, the grounds of the wise ones. So here's our Bodhisattva saying exactly the same thing. He's saying, yeah, wow. Now, from the time of the Buddhas, when the Buddha was in the world, so shoot back 2,550 years, and here's a Bodhisattva who was there speaking on behalf of the Buddha, and he said, boy, these are hard to get to hear even then. So you add 2,500 years onto this timeline, and you can think how hard it is now, how rare to encounter these texts. And here they are, in multiple languages. How nice that is. In 100,000 eons, it's hard to get to hear principles such as these, the grounds of the wise ones, says Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, speaking on behalf of the Buddha. What else? 2 more lines. 我今忽然耳朵闻. I, but it means we. We, today, 忽然, all of a sudden, just like that, just as it arises. 耳朵, there's the same word as the last one in sentence 2. We get to when hear. Now we get our chance. This is the time we can hear it. 菩萨圣恒妙法音. This is a very interesting sentence. Look, bodhisattvas, sheng, sublime, wondrous, special, heng, practices. Miao, wondrous, fa, dharma, in, sound. The wonderful Dharma sound of Bodhisattva's sublime practices. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that's what our chapter, the 10 grounds chapter, is all about. What Bodhisattvas do. It's about the practices, the deeds of awakened beings, people who live not only for themselves, people whose lives are big-hearted, people whose eyes are wide. They don't only see the benefit in front of them. They, in fact, see that clearly, but they also see, they want it to go further. They see the benefits to others. So that would be a bodhisattva. And the things they do, they're sublime practices. Sublime because they're unselfish, because they're expansive and uplifting. People who, when you're with them, you gain altitude. You see things from a higher perspective just by being with them. So that's the wondrous Dharma sound of Bodhisattva's sublime practices. We get to hear those now at this point, and they're really hard to get to encounter over hundreds of thousands of eons. An eon is a very long period of time. And these are indeed the meanings of the grounds of wise ones. Okay, so here's our Bodhisattva saying, yeah, special. This is not ordinary. This goes beyond the news. It goes beyond the sports scores and goes beyond the holidays and the ups and downs of politics. And these are, to get to hear the grounds, are very special. Now, is that an opinion, or is that, would you say, is that true? Is that factual? Well, facts are, we learned that in our last election, was that facts depend on who's telling them to be facts. You can have competing sets of facts when you have people trying to get into office. So, is this an opinion of the Bodhisattva that these are so rare? in order to answer that, probably there's a lot of different answers, but one way to look at it, one way to measure it would be to say something like, what's the intent? If you want to know whether a thought in the mind is a wholesome thought or an unwholesome thought, a harmful thought or a skillful thought, sometimes it's hard to tell, because when you flip it over, bad for you could be good for someone else. So what do you use as your yardstick? And the answer is often intention. What did you mean? What was the purpose behind what you said? The words themselves are plastic, but the intent is pretty clear if you're honest in listening. So if good words, if the intent was to deceive, become less good, become bad words. So what was the Buddha's intent in talking about, what were the wise ones' intent as they talked about these grounds? And you'd have to say ending suffering, for sure. Making people hurt less. Giving life to animals that were about to be slaughtered. Waking people up from harmful behavior that they themselves, because somebody led them astray, bad friends, you wake them up, you say, no, it's okay if you don't go to Reno over the weekend. You'll come, you may not have quite as much excitement, but you'll have money in your pocket, you won't have gotten drunk, you won't have gotten in a fight, you won't have lost it all at the gambling tables. So it's okay. To have a friend who can wake you up is a wholesome intent. So there you go, ending suffering. That's a wholesome intent. And if you use that yardstick to measure these texts, they stand the test. That's good enough. There's goodness here by preventing harm. So the principle is what? Ahimsa. What is that wonderful word? Ahimsa, Sanskrit word that means no harm. If you apply that as your yardstick, if I have to decide in myself, should I do it or shouldn't I? Should I do it or shouldn't I? Got a choice. Yes or no. Looks pretty good, but something in the back of my mind is going ding, 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 ding. So, who's going to decide? Well, in the end, you have to decide. I have to decide. How do you find out? One thing is, open the sutra. Check what bodhisattvas do, because that's a fairly unwavering standard based on the Buddha's insight. So if you don't have the sutra and you got to make a decision, ask yourself, who gets hurt if I do this? Anybody? If the answer is nobody, it's benefit for all, probably it's okay. Go do it with energy. But if the answer is someone else gets hurt so that I can go forward, then the Buddha would say that is not wholesome, skillful. It's not decreasing harm. It's increasing suffering. So you're still free to do it. The Buddha's never going to say, therefore you're bad and I don't like you, or you're going to hell. He'll say, there's consequences. This is not free. There's a price tag, a hidden price tag on this action, which is suffering and the karma that's involved. So we think we call it what? We call it a great restaurant, fancy restaurant. This is a really nice night at a restaurant. And you go in and you get the braised duck, and you get the caviar, and you get the pig's knuckles, and I guess probably you don't go to the pig knuckle restaurants that much, like different part of town. But you wind up with all kinds of animal bodies in your stomach, and the result is you're connected to those animals in a harmful, not a harmless way. So you go, if I'd thought it over, I could have gone to the vegan restaurant all the same, the veggie restaurant, or I could have brought them to my apartment and cooked up some really yummy vegetarian stew that is karma-free, and we would have had a good time. So these are choices that we make, and if we can ask ourselves, harmless or harmful, ahimsa or harmful, then we can say, okay, there's the motive. And let's apply that to our sutra. All the principles here are guaranteed harmless and beneficial for all. One of the huge awakenings that I had was, I'm about to claim a huge awakening. Anybody worried about that? If the monk is going to claim a huge awakening? One of the huge awakenings that I had was, I had to go all the way to my graduate education. I was a PhD candidate at the seminary when I finally got to touch the Old Testament studies. I was raised Christian, right? I was a Methodist, but my Bible studies, the Methodists are Bible light, L-I-T-E, right? Bible light. We're not Bible heavy the way more traditional conservative fundamentalist evangelical congregations might be. So my encounters with the Old Testament were limited to a quote in the sermon every Sunday. The pastor was required to introduce one quote, and often it would be the topic, and then he would go off into the gospel. But we touched the Old Testament and the New Testament, so the Hebrew Scriptures and the Gospels. And didn't have much knowledge of the Old Testament until I got to my first 2 years of graduate study at the Franciscan School of Theology, FST, where Father Michael Guinan, this old classics professor, Franciscan friar, introduced us to the Hebrew Scriptures. And he was able to do it because Father Michael was a language classicist. He had studied at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and he was an expert in about 4 biblical languages. And he had been part of a Vatican commission to study the Dead Sea Scrolls, the very text we were talking about. So he knew his chops. He really could handle Greek and Aramaic and Latin and Sumerian and these biblical languages. And he took us through a wild ride through the Old Testament, through the Hebrew Scriptures, and had my eyes open. It was a major enlightenment, I must say. So Father Michael was not reverent as he touched the Hebrew Scriptures. He was kind of salty, kind of cynical, or maybe a lot cynical, and he would go, "Now, those folks who say that every word in the Hebrew Scriptures comes from the mouth of God, they probably haven't read the same Bible that I read." He said, "I'll show you in this passage where the story of Moses parting the Red Sea," he says, "every sentence comes from a different layer of accretion of this text, and it's about 200 years per sentence." He said, "You see this? This is Aramaic, but you see the next sentence? That's Greek. They lost the text and somebody stitched it together. This section was chopped out by the Pharisees back in Old Jerusalem because they didn't didn't help them, establish their rule. And over here, this chunk," and he went on, and when you were done, he had patched the whole Bible together from about 700 years of scholars deleting and we'd say cutting and pasting now, And then he took us through. He said, "Well, I just wish," he said, "we have a Buddhist monk in the class." That would be me sitting in the front row, my eyes really wide and taking notes. He says, "We have a Buddhist monk in the class, and sometimes, I would actually rather be a Buddhist," he says. "When it comes to the bloodthirsty, bloodletting genocide in this text that I come from," he said, "I want to show you a passage here." And he took us through, I don't have the citation, but it might have been Deuteronomy, or it was in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. And he said, "Here we have the whirlwind going through the valley. You all aware of the whirlwind?" "No, Father." He said, "Well, the whirlwind is," he said, "that's God. And God appeared to the Israelites as a whirlwind. And it was a particularly bloodthirsty God at that point. He said, you're right here, he says, here's the text. And this story comes to us intact, he said, meaning it hadn't been written and rewritten and written and rewritten. He said, and the whirlwind says, these are disbelievers, and the chosen people, that would be the Israelites, are supposed to go through and kill, without exception, every man, woman, child, and animal in the valley, and without exception, and kill them all because they are disbelievers. And he said, and so the tribe did that with the aid of the whirlwind. And as it says, as it was for that village, so it was with 60 villages throughout the valley. He said, sometimes when I read that, I just weep and I wish I were a Buddhist, he said. So it's like, oh my goodness. So I'm like, this is the Bible? Boy, I didn't read that. Let me read that again. He certainly got my attention. And you realize that what we call Scripture, or sacred texts, is as much history as it is spiritual guidance, or what we would look to the Buddhist sutras for. How to cultivate principles for perfecting your humanity, ways to practice blessings, ways to transcend birth and death. What do you go to a Buddhist sutra for? Well, not a history about how it was back in the Buddhist time or before. But indeed, here we have in the Old Testament, and I'm taking this from a Franciscan Catholic friar who's been teaching Old Testament at GTU for 30-some years and comes from, he has the pedigree. This is a man who's qualified to know what's in that book, and he's saying, this is a bloodthirsty, god-awful story of cultural, racial genocide of the tribes aided by God, who appears in the guise of a whirlwind. So you think about that, and you think, man, that's violent. That's a violent text. And there it is. Those are the times. And so why are we shocked? Are we less violent? What do we call it? We call it shock and awe as the bombs descend on Baghdad, right? The missiles and the rockets. We're not going to go there tonight, not going to distract us from. But before we, raise an eyebrow and say, yick, the Hebrew Scriptures are violent, we could say humanity is violent. And at least in the Hebrew Scriptures, somebody was keeping track. If that's a historical record and not a fictionalized account meant to sell Scripture or not, that's fairly accurate history coming down all these thousands of years. If we were to tell the truth about what's going on right now with drone strikes and with slavery, with the imprisonment of more than half, we don't want to distract from the focus on the text, but to say if we were keeping track right now, we would have a story fully as bloodthirsty as the whirlwind going through the valley, disrupting 60 villages. So, not to be shocked, just to say, same old story. We haven't changed that much. Humanity is still at that process of killing each other. In that case, what's kind of fascinating is that there's, quote, divine aid in the story. There's a magical element in that story of the whirlwind. What in the world is the whirlwind? Kamikaze. It's the divine, the shenfeng, the spirit wind? I don't know. Now maybe we call it computerized drone strikes. You can kill somebody from Omaha, Nebraska with a drone that's over Pakistan. So that's probably the equivalent of the whirlwind. Anyway, no matter true or not, here's in your hand, in front of you, excuse me, here we have with these sutras, at long last, an alternative to that version of humanity. The point of that digression to talk about why these are rare and special is there is no bloodshed. in these sutras. These are ancient documents that come down with the same amount of sacred attention and focus that we have in the Hebrew Scriptures. And yet, these are entirely focused on ahimsa. So when you use that yardstick to judge wholesome, unwholesome, you go, yeah, that's true. If you read widely, no matter whether it's Pali-based, Agamas or the Nikayas, whether it's the Sanskrit-based sutras of the Mahayana, whether it's the recensions into Tibetan or Mongolian or Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, you won't find hatred, you won't find greed, you won't find anything that will lead you astray into delusion in these texts. How nice, how wonderful. And yet, somebody might say, yeah, well, it doesn't sound very interesting either. I kind of like a little bloodshed in my light reading. That's why we have so many, shoot-'em-up movies on the screen. That's why James Bond is so popular. Yet another James Bond film came out, even beyond Ian Fleming's original writing of them. There's a brand new Bond movie, something, number 22 or something like that. So, why are these still such incredible, compelling reading? It's because these are human documents. You don't find bloodshed, you don't find greed, you don't find hatred and delusion in these texts, but you do find your own face. You find humanity at its most developed, free of ahimsa, or free with ahimsa intact, free of the killing, the harming that ahimsa is the antidote for. So these are never boring. The Avatamsaka Sutra is like a mirror. And as you, certainly there's language that is ancient and kind of hard, you have to bridge over to the language because it's been with us, as I say, for 2,500 years. But as you go into it, there's no bloodletting, there's no murdering of men, women, children, and livestock, but it keeps your interest because this is a document about what I can become if I cultivate the Bodhisattva's sublime practices. It's humanity perfected. So it's the rise of humanity, not the fall of humanity. So it avoids being dull or boring or somehow too good to be true. It's so good, it has to be true. So, all right? Let's look at number 2. Here we go. I'll just do it. Here we go. 言更言说从会者后地决定无欲道利益一切诸天人此诸佛子皆要闻 We hope that you, wise one, will go on to proclaim the path of the next ground decisively, omitting nothing, for the benefit of every God and human. We disciples of the Buddha would all like to hear it. Okay, this carries us back to the first ground. Actually, before that, to the preface. What was in the preface? We had this really interesting dialogue. The 10 Grounds chapter is more than halfway through the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is this is chapter 26 out of 40. And as it began, people will recall, the Buddha gave the job to Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva, explain the 10 grounds. And the other bodhisattvas and the gods and the eightfold pantheon of spiritual beings were all there saying, yeah, please, we want to hear the 10 grounds. We're anxious. We've come a long way to hear them. And Vajra Treasury didn't speak. He didn't say anything. And a bodhisattva named Moon of Liberation, Jietoye Pusa, Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva, stood up, walked around the Buddha the Bodhisattva with his palms together, bared his shoulder, and said, "We really want to hear the 10 grounds. We're ready, and we hope you'll speak." And Vajratresuri still didn't speak. And then the Buddha, after repeated back and forth, the Buddha finally said, "It's okay, go ahead." Vajratresuri said, "I don't think so." He actually said no to the Buddha. "I don't think so. They're not going to get it. It's too lofty. It's too hard for them. It's hard to believe. And if you don't believe it and you slander it, say, no, it can't be true, this is too far out, then you haven't helped. You've actually hurt. You've harmed people's faith." So the Buddha says, okay, no problem. You go ahead and speak the Dharma. And when the Buddha tells him twice, Vajratresuri has to speak. So he, at that point, goes ahead, jumps in, and explains these principles. So this text comes out of that back and forth, which I think is so interesting. We say it's a human document. Well, you can kind of imagine the Buddha sitting there, ready to the time is right to speak the Dharma, and his spokesperson, who he's tapped, Vajratresuri, doesn't want to do it. So here we have again the request. "We hope that you, wise one," meaning Vajratresuri Bodhisattva, "will go on to proclaim the path of the next ground decisively. Don't leave anything out. For the benefit of the gods and the humans and everyone here, we disciples of the Buddha would all like to hear it." Okay, so there's our request once again. Back to the beginning. And what happened next? "Yongmeng da xin jie to ye, qing jin gang zang yan fo zi, cong shi zhuan ru di si di, so you heng xiang yuan xuan shuo." The heroic one, big-hearted, Moon of Liberation, asked Vajratresuri, "Disciple of the Buddha, we wish you would proclaim from here, in turn, all the hallmarks of practice needed to learn the fourth ground." There are people who are qualified to know who say that the Buddha Dharma entirely is education. The whole thing is education. That the Buddha was a teacher, just like your third grade teacher. He's giving us information that we didn't know before, but once we hear it, we awaken to it, because the Buddha himself was a person in the world, a prince, who sat still, purified his body, mouth, and mind, focused his concentration, and discovered the Dharma inside, and then taught it to people's potentials to hear. So the Dharma is, it's everybody's got it, you could say. It's somehow coded deep inside, but we need the requisite Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, wisdom, the precepts, the concentration, and the wisdom for it to flow, for it to shine. And so this knowledge is there, this information is there, but the teacher has to wake us up to it. The phrase that education is remembering. Was that Plato quoted that? Who said, "Don't check. Anybody who's got his Wikipedia, put it away." All right. But we could check, and I think you'll probably, what is it? Learning is a process of remembering. Einstein or Plato? Plato, yeah. All learning is a process of remembering. So that knowledge is there, we just have to, now I see the connection. That makes sense. Oh, right, that's, I hear that echoing deep down, like that. That's the process of waking up to the Dharma wisdom that we have in us, kind of like software on your hard drive that you boot up and then it starts to work. So, is the Buddha a teacher? Is this an education? That's an interesting way to look at the Dharma. So, big-hearted moon of liberation, the heroic one, who, despite Vajra Treasury, who's a pretty awesome individual, did not get bullied, didn't get intimidated. Not that Vajra Treasury would intimidate him, but he, socially, as he was asking for the Dharma, it would have been kind of more convenient for him to go, okay, just acquiesce. But he said, actually, these are bodhisattvas who have real profound roots of goodness. You should speak. It's your job. The Buddha has asked you to do it. We are waiting. These are not wimpy neophytes here. These are people with practice and goodness. Please speak the Dharma. That's how it began back when. So moon of liberation is back. That's why he's called the heroic one, because he was courageous in doing something uncomfortable, insisting that Vajra Treasury hear the voices, hear the hearts and the thoughts of the bodhisattvas gathered around. And sure enough, moon of liberation was right. So, big-hearted moon of liberation asked Vajra Treasury once again, disciple of the Buddha, I would like you to proclaim from here in turn all the hallmarks of practice needed to learn the fourth ground. All right? Tell us everything we need to know in order to get this to work. So, what would a hallmark of practice be? What in the world is that? Here's one. People ask me about meditation a lot. And I know in the Chan school, which is our tradition, as well as the Thai forest tradition, there are meditation instructions about things that you can experience that show you that you're on the path, and instructions about how to avoid taking those things and going wrong with them, right? One of the books that explains this and has been a mainstay of the Vipassana tradition is called the Visuddhimagga, the Path of Purification. And it's what you call an extra-canonical text. It's not spoken by the Buddha, but it arose in the tradition, particularly around Sri Lanka. But it was early Theravada, but in Chinese it became the Qingjing Dao, the Path of Purification. This is a meditation manual. It's a book that gives you all kinds of instructions about what to look at, what to look for, what to notice, and how to react when those things happen. It's fascinating. If you're interested in meditation beyond just sitting every now and then, somebody who's actually applying themselves to practice, who devote time every day to their meditation practice, benefit hugely by looking at the path of purification, the Visuddhimagga. It's already become public domain. It's printed and reprinted and printed and reprinted. But there's an example of hallmarks of practice. As you read in the Visuddhimagga, let me give you an example. There was this Dharma door, this method of practice called the contemplations of a decaying corpse, right? The 9 stages of a decaying corpse. And being a brand new monk in San Francisco in the 70s, I would run into this and think, whoa, that sounds kinky, wow, decaying corpses, whoa, dude, what does that mean? And that's weird, Buddhists do this? And I think, yeah. And then you would hear about you'd hear from Ajahn Sumedho, or somebody would say, that there was an opportunity in the Thai, in Bangkok, sometimes if you knew the coroner or the chief of police or a hospital administrator, they would sometimes arrange opportunities for the for the Sangha to go look at corpses after a freeway accident or something like that. And the conditions had to be right, but that was something that happened, as you could go contemplate impermanence. Because yesterday was a beautiful young thing on her way to a dance and with all of her future ahead of her, and now her life is over, and his life is over. And monks being interested in looking past the surface to the reality of the body and our lives would sometimes take this opportunity. We'd hear about that. Now, in America, that doesn't happen all that much, You don't go contemplate impermanence at the hospital. But we'd hear about this and we'd go, gee, wow, what's that like? So I kind of parked that in the back of my mind, and there's also in the morning chanting in the Pali tradition, there's the contemplation of the elements of the body. 32 or 36? 36. 32 elements of the body. And you chant them in Pali, and you can chant them in English, and you go through the whole list of the elements of the body, and it omits none, and it's pretty sobering as you look at the snot and the mucus, and it's so on and so on. So anyway, I picked up the Visuddhimagga back to the path of purification, and in the Visuddhimagga, here is the spokesperson, Nanamali, the venerable, who is describing all of these hallmarks. The what? The hallmarks of practice. And he says, here's what you do. If you want to contemplate a decaying corpse, it is not gawking at dead bodies. It is not kinky. It's not shocking and far out, which at the time it increased my false thinking to think of staring at a dead body. No, here is how it is done, says the Visuddhimagga. It says, first, ask your teacher if it is suitable for you to practice this way, and obtain the teacher's permission before you consider doing this. Should your good and wise advisor, your Kalyana Mitra, determine that this is suitable for you, then you may possibly encounter a dead animal somewhere on the path when you go for alms rounds. And as you read this, you realize, oh, this is set in an agrarian context. This is in a village, right, where the Wat is, the monastery is out of town. So as you go through the woods, if you go through the fields, especially if it's a farming community, you may well encounter a dead animal. So if you should do this, then ask your teacher whether this is a suitable object for contemplation. If your teacher says it is suitable, it is good that you go contemplate, then go with your teacher and approach no closer than 25 paces from the rabbit corpse that is there, the half of the rabbit that's left after the coyotes ate the other half. And then contemplate. Carefully observe any affliction that arises in your mind. If you, the meditator, has aversion, then stop the practice. If you have attraction, stop the practice and come another day, or report it to your teacher. Should your mind remain calm and level as you observe the changes of the body that you see decaying here, you may approach 10 paces away 1 week later. You go back a week later and get closer, and you look, and notice. And he said, notice that now at this point, the body has swollen, because bodies are like that. There's lots of liquids and gases inside. Notice the swollen. Should you have aversion, should you have liking, report it to your teacher and stop the practice immediately. And then, he take you through 9 different stages. You go through the the bloating of the corpse, and then the discoloration of the corpse, and then the corpse splits open, and then the corpse, I don't want to create aversion in any of you, and certainly not liking. I hope nobody's liking this description. All right? So, and if you do, don't tell me, all right, because I'm not your teacher. So then it goes through, the bones are revealed, the skeleton comes out, and then the skeleton and the body is dismembered, and pieces go in different, the limbs are scattered. And then bit by bit it turns to dust. And the contemplation takes the meditator gradually watching his or her mind every single step of the way towards the natural changing of our own bodies. And of course the connection is, as you're looking at the dead, bird or rabbit on the pathway, you're connecting that to your own body and our own mortality, and how, like that, so are we, no different. So when I read that, it was like, oh, well, that's not as much fun as I thought it was going to be. I was looking for a horror film, kind of, ooh, groovy, and that's my worldly mind. I was totally not in a Dharma context. And as I read the Visuddhimagga, it's like, yeah, step by step. Oh, the point is what? The point is to watch my thoughts, not to look at something kinky, die, and decay. No, using nature to help me understand things as they are, the nature of reality. This is me. This is all conditioned things, earth, air, fire, and water, brought together temporarily, with karma as the glue, makes these bodies come about. And as you watch, bit by bit, and the value is on keeping your equanimity. The value is not on seeing something, very kind of dramatic as something's dead. It's not a Hollywood vision of death. It's not a, what is it, Miami CSI version of death, or a cowboy movie. It's notice how things change. Connect it to yourself, and at all times watch your thoughts. And with that in mind, it's like, oh, wow, that's really, really different than what I thought. So where do you get that? The Visuddhimagga. The 9 stages of the decaying corpse is indeed a biology lesson. It's a natural history lesson. It's a psychological opportunity to observe the mind. It's mindfulness at its best, and it's also the reality of not self, impermanent, transient, and ultimately empty. So that's when the Bodhisattva here says, look for the hallmarks of practice needed to learn the 4th ground. There's an example of how the Dharma gives us a very, very different, disciplined, step-by-step, sequential, helpful, unforgettable way to connect to the reality of our bodies in the world past the surface, right? It's not who I see in the mirror. I don't see the decaying corpse in the mirror, but indeed, there's not a single one of us who will not pass through that process at some point. So, how helpful that is. Here we have the 4th ground, which is very much about hallmarks of practice. This particular chapter brings us what are called the 37 limbs of enlightenment, known as the Bodhipakya Dharma in Pali, known as the Bodhipaksha Dharmas in Sanskrit. The Chinese call them the Sanshi Daopin, sometimes called the Sanshi Puti Funfa, the 37 shares of Bodhi, the 37 limbs of awakening. That's the tofu and the broccoli, not the meat and potatoes. That's the tofu and the broccoli of this text, the 4th ground, is these 37 paths, 37 dharmas that you practice towards awakening. And we're almost done with the translated. This coming week, we're going to be adding um, a large chunk as we translate, and ideally we'll have this booklet ready in a week or two. But the 37 limbs, the 37 wings, the 37 Bodhi shares are lists of 7 categories of practice that are just like the contemplations of a decaying corpse, where we take them kind of, what do we have as, what could we relate to? Like medicines, I guess you could say. If the Buddha is the master healer, then he gives medicine according to our illness so that we can get better. Of course, he's healing the Dharma body. And what would he prescribe? Well, sometimes he prescribes the 4 places of mindfulness. Sometimes he describes the 4 right efforts. Sometimes he describes the 4 bases of psychic power. Other times he describes the 5 roots of practice. Other times the 5 strengths, the 5 powers of practice. Then there's a list called the 7 branches of awakening. And then the last is the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path that is familiar to us from the Theravada tradition. So here's the Mahayana teaching the Eightfold Path, identical to the Pali versions. And those are the 37, right? The 4 this, the 5 that, the 7 this, the 8 that. Together 37 dharmas. And our fourth ground here lays them out one by one as, quote, hallmarks of practice. Things you do, ways you know that you're doing good, you're going right, or that you've strayed off, that you need to correct your course. And as Master Hsuan Hua presented it, and I know as the Venerable Ajahn Chah presented it, it was very much adjustment. Cultivation and practice was always like, oh, okay, well, not quite. Add a little bit. Oh, too much. Come back. It was always adjustment. That's why a teacher and Dharma friends are so important, because the Dharma that the Buddha taught is always the middle way. And yet it's rarely the middle. Mostly it's too much or too little. And we adjust. And without the admonishment of a good teacher, it's easy to just grab onto something and run it to death and think, I can't quit. If I quit, I'm quitting. I'm going to disappoint the Buddha. I'm going to be a bad disciple. And so we run it to the extreme and leave the middle. Or we get discouraged and just quit. Say, oh, it's too hard. Nobody ever did this. Why bother? Who do you know who's enlightened? Nobody's basically. I'm going to go get baptized. At least then the food's better. The fellowship's better at the church. Potlucks. So we usually go too short or too much, one or the other. And my experience with Master Hsuan Hua was always adjusting. Well, I think it's time in the middle of this Chan session after the 3rd week to teach you all some yoga. So I've invited our local yoga teacher to come and teach you headstands. So right in the middle of the tense white knuckle, gritting teeth Chan meditation, and my knees hurt so bad I can't stand it, What is that woman in the leotard doing a headstand in the middle of the Chan hall for? Shifu, is it? Oh, that's Shifu? Yep. Okay. Headstands? Okay, Shifu. So we all wind up doing headstands in the middle of the Chan retreat. And it turns out that Master Hua did headstands every day. That was one of his practices, I understand it. So there we go, practicing yoga. And sure enough, that afternoon, the Chan was so different. We had gone too tight, and we needed to loosen up as a group. And he adjusted us, back to the middle. Too much and too little are the same thing. So it's always this practice of, if you're going long, if you don't care, if it's just for today and you bust, well, who cares? You bust and you quit. Or you slack off and forget. But for someone who's made a commitment, who says, no, I really believe that the Dharma is going to develop my wisdom and my compassion, and I might have a chance to help people and the world out if I learn something here instead of simply living for myself and for the moment. So if you have that as your goal, if you've made that resolve, then you want to find the middle and adjust it so you can keep going. Another example, if you drive with your parking brake on, what happens? Before you get to the freeway on-ramp, your brakes are red hot and there's a bad smell. What was that? You're too tight, right? But if you drive with your lug nuts loose on your wheels, plump, 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 you can't go anywhere because it's too loose, right? So you adjust it so you can go long. And that's these 37 limbs are all like that. It's a process of finding the middle, of adjusting, right up, I think, to the step before Buddhahood is all a process of finding the middle. Too much and too little are the same thing. So, here we are, and I'm going to take us into this set of lists. Let's continue into the page here. 尔时金刚藏菩萨告解脱曰菩萨言：佛子菩萨摩诃萨第三地善清净已，欲入第四言会地，当修行十法明门，何等为实？ At that time, Vajra Bodhisattva said to Muna Liberation Bodhisattva, disciples of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, who has already mastered the third ground, and who wishes to learn the fourth, the ground of blazing wisdom, should cultivate 10 methods for understanding the Dharma. What are the 10? So he's agreed. Vajra says, okay, yes, that's my job. So I'm talking to you, Muna Liberation Bodhisattva, but I know that all the other members of the assembly are here listening too, so I'm going to talk to all of you at once. If you have come through the third ground already and learned what I explained then, and you want to proceed to the fourth, the ground of blazing wisdom, here is the basic. Here are the basics. This is the preliminary. 10 methods for understanding the Dharma. The Chinese says, very interestingly, he says, 当修行十法明门. You should, it's appropriate, it's right for you to cultivate, to practice 10 shi, fa, Dharma, ming, light, radiance, mun, doors or gateways. You should cultivate according to, you should pass through, you should master 10 fa, ming, mun. How do we translate fa, ming, mun? It's interesting. It could be 10 dharmas for lighting up a gate. 10 dharma, gate lighting dharmas. No, I don't think that's what it is, but that's one way to translate that. It's, the mun part is clear, doorways. Is it a light door? Is it a well-lit, clean, well-lit place for cultivation? Could be. It's a door of light. It's a lighted door, a gateway. It's a path, a passage that is well illuminated. Something like that. It's a Dharma light door, a Dharma illumination door. So you could say it's a gateway, meaning a method that sheds light on the Dharma. That's another way to translate this. It's when you go through this, you're more clear on the Dharma than you were before. So this word ming can also mean to clarify, to explain. So it's a passageway that helps you understand the Dharma. It's a doorway, a method that is well lit. And it's a Dharma doorway. So this is one of the beauties of Chinese is that it's creatively ambiguous, and the syntax allows you to stitch it together in different ways. 10 methods for understanding the Dharma. So it could be a Dharma understanding method. That's how we translated it. 10 Dharma clarifying passages, ways to go. Okay, you should cultivate 10 Dharma illuminating methods. And so with that in mind, we can hang on to that. We don't have to decide exactly what it is, but see what they are. The next thing to do is to dive into the 10 and see if they don't tell us what they are. And we'll be doing that next week. We'll continue with the fourth ground next week. And the 10 that they introduce are really huge, talking about the cosmos. Very big frame for this fourth ground. Any questions or comments about what do we look at? We mentioned how difficult it is to encounter the Dharma, how special, how rare, and how it's harmless. Ahimsa is the nature of this. And then we talked about the encounter between Vajra Treasury and those who asked him to speak, and how he kind of refused and then was convinced finally. And then moon liberation and his part in that, and what are hallmarks of practice, and how you approach the Dharma and the middle path, the middle way. Any questions? Somebody? Yes, yeah, Yuhan.
From the habit ground, the first ground, to the third ground, in the very beginning, we always have a beautiful list of 10 lies.
Mm.
But now in the fourth ground, and my stupidity is seeking for the 10 lies.
Mm-hmm.
But here, we don't see the 10 lies list. So I'm wondering that if this suggests, does this suggest that from third ground to fourth ground is really you different? I mean, it's a big jump.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what Iwan is pointing to is in the first, second, and third ground, one of the things that happens every time, and you can definitely find patterns that repeat from ground to ground. There are 10 discrete units in the 10 ground chapter. Each ground is a unit, and they're linked, and they're the contents are different and unique, but there are patterns that are the same from 1 to 10. One of those patterns that Yuhan just mentioned is the Bodhisattva says we need to use 10 shin, 10 mindsets, 10 attitudes, 10 orientations before we can get the ground. Here, we haven't seen them yet. That's her question. And why is that? They come back, by the way. 5th, 6th, 7th. If you look ahead, you'll see those hearts are there, the 10 mindsets, the 10 attitudes. We translated them as hearts. You have to have 10 hearts to enter the ground. And that's not, that takes us in the wrong direction, I think. So, in other words, when you meet this education, when the Bodhisattva gives you this information about the 10 grounds that he hopes we will practice, there's an approach. Part of it is, quote, psychological. That's the language we use now. But there's definitely a kind of what do you say? There's an attitude, a mindset. That's the best way. That gives you this information. And it's not here, but what is here, in Yihuan, I would point you to what is here. And it's right where we are here. These are Shi Fa Ming Man. And what is a man here? It's a word that's used for school, like, the Chan school or the optometry school, a place where you learn these things. So it's a man. It's also a gate. It's something that you go through, and when you do, you're in a different space. Having gone through the gate, you're in a different space. And what modifies these gates, they are Mingmen. They're clarity gates, clarification gates. They're light gateways, schools. So why are we juggling as we say this? Is because these words have more than one meaning. Ming here can be clarification, clarity, but it can also be just light. It's a picture of the sun and the moon. Notice that word Ming. We're on the line 3 at the bottom paragraph, and it's character 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ming, that's the left side is the sun, the right side is the moon. Sun and moon are the sources of light in the sky and for our solar system. And put them together and you have light, radiance. So they're radiance gates, gateways to light. They're lighted gates. They're, like we say, a clean, well-lighted place for cultivation. So what does it mean exactly? If you can hold those ideas in your mind at the same time, you kind of I think you get the feeling for it. Instead of having 10 mindsets, it's 10 Fa Mingmen, practices that shed light on the Dharma. So it's slightly different. And the grounds, this Dashabhumi, the 10 grounds chapter, has its own life outside of the Avatamsaka Sutra. If you go back to our text, to our Tripitaka here on the wall, and you open the Avatamsaka volume, you meet several different versions of the 10 grounds chapter. And the information in them is roughly the same. So some people would say that the 10 grounds chapter came out of the Avatamsaka and circulated on its own because people liked it so much. It's the stories of bodhisattvas. Or that it pre-existed and the Avatamsaka gathered it in. Scholars will tell you that they stitched it in. It's one of the flowers in the flower garland. So there's different, and historically we won't be able to know for sure, but that's kind of gives you the feeling that this is a powerful text. Of the 40 chapters in the Avatamsaka, there are several that have a kind of a life outside of the Avatamsaka Sutra. For example, in the Pali tradition, the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada is an agama or a nikaya. It's in the agamas, right? The Dhammapada is agama number 11, or I forget what it's collected. Yeah, it's one of the Khuddaka Nikaya. So it's so popular. People love that particular teaching, and so they will know the Dhammapada, but not the Khuddaka Nikaya that it came from. So in the Mahayana tradition, there are lots of texts like that. And so this is one of those. So in the midst of that, they all give us 10 mindsets that we need to approach, but we also here have Dharma illuminating gateways. So Iwan, you can hold on to that, and as we go through, compare and see, are they different than the Shirshin, the 10 minds, or Question. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. That's maybe so. That's an interesting idea. Tell me your name. Chikako-san said, this might be, instead of a mindset, the shin that we've already had, this might be a preparation. Once you enter the gate, then you can approach the wisdom. That's another way to look at what this might be. So, I certainly cannot say this is how it is, but I would like to raise the question and then allow everybody to think it through, to contemplate. What could it be? All right. Good. I'm going to stand up and come back. I'll be right back. I wanted to honor something that happened this last week, and this came back to us. This is a volume of the Taisho Tripitaka, our canon collection, and I used this volume for my doctoral dissertation preparation, and at the time, because I had referred to this so much, I had it kind of permanently out of the shelf in the dining room where I had all my books. And I don't know if people remember at the time, there was one of the tables had a permanent stack of about 30 books. It was there for months, and they were all thumbed. This was on top, and the light caused the gold on the binding to dim. It got bleached out. And I didn't realize this was so light sensitive. And it went dark. And which is not a good sign for my dissertation, is it? Wow, talk about a gateway of light. It was a gateway of darkness. So here was fine because there was a book. We had a covering on it. But this got all bleached out. And it looks so bad because all the others in the set, you don't want the Buddha Sutras to look tatty. So for years, this was dark, and every time I would do a ceremony, I would be looking at the Tripitaka, and one volume is dark, and the others are all shining with gold. So it had always been on my mind and unhappy. But how do you get one volume rebound? Because this came from Taiwan. And when Du Lao Shi, Professor Du, was here, with his wife, we were walking around one day, and I mentioned to him about my predicament, my problem, that I had caused the sutra to become dark. And he said, "Oh, I happen to know those folks. They're right in Taipei, so I'll take it back and ask them what to do." And through the help of Dharma friends who are here tonight and a lot of hard work, in a month, actually 6 weeks, this got rebound, regilded, and put back in shape. And when the volume came out of the wrapper just last week and back from Taiwan, all nice and tidy and looking identical, my heart something went, finally at last. And there were all kinds of options discussed, such as, throwing the other one away and getting a whole new volume, and that would have wasted that's disrespectful to the contents. And so the company was able to simply redo it, rebind it. So how nice, and I just wanted to express my appreciation to those who put out the effort and the mindfulness and the kindness to prevent me from having the negative karma of causing the sutra to get discolored and lose its light. So our set is reunited and made whole once again. How nice that is. That's the right way to do it. Okay, we need to transfer the merit from the lecture, and if you would turn to the back of your songbook, which is there on your bowing cushion, or if you need one, we have one for you. If you don't have one but you have the chanting sheet, that we began our Dharma request, that also has the dedication. And we do this with a wish that you make. It's interactive, so you can make a wish to send out your merit however you would like it to be done. And when we do it together, it gets real strength. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward, may all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. While you have your songbook there, where is it? Okay, please turn to page 86. We've just been through Thanksgiving, and I was in the interesting position, and people can't appreciate this, I guess, if they don't have the context. When everybody explains to me Chinese New Year's, I go, yeah, You know, and Chinese New Year's is huge. It's just huge. Everything stops. Everything stops. In Taiwan, in China, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, Malaysia. Stops for 10 days. And you prepare before that, you know. And the same thing with Tet in the Vietnamese tradition. Everything stops. And you celebrate. And all the debts are forgiven, and all the banks, no banking. And boy, when the banking stops, you know that's serious in China. So that's, and I'm like, oh yeah? Oh, okay. You do go home on Chinese New Year's, right? So I'm totally ignorant of all of that, and yet that half of the world, it is a very big deal. So it is with Thanksgiving. And yet it's our version of that. And you go home when you can. So here I was on Thursday morning, one of the two people in the room, maybe three, who'd ever experienced Thanksgiving, explaining Thanksgiving to about 80 people who hadn't a clue about Thanksgiving. Pretty funny situation. It's like everybody's going, uh-huh, mm-hmm. We'll humor him. It's okay, you know. Trying to describe all the pies, pumpkin pie, mince pie, blueberry pie, and all those pies, and you stuff yourself, and then you watch TV, watch football. And the uncles go to sleep on the couch, you know, and I wake them up, man, this is a good, you know, third quarter, you know, you owe me $5 if they win. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. And I described the electric carving knife on the turkey, and you have this dead carcass in the middle of the table, and the oldest male gets in there, cuts a chunk of the meat off and passes it around. It's like, you know. So it's and you overeat. You definitely, one of the goals is to stuff yourself. It's one of the times when you do. Lots of food, and that's the idea. And it's such a custom that it's, you see generosity practiced on an amazing scale. Turkey dinners for the homeless. And if you had somebody in your neighborhood when I was growing up who was, we didn't say poor, we didn't say, underserved populations, the words that we use now. We just said, you know, going through a hard time, meaning poor in the neighborhood. Somebody, you'd send a Thanksgiving basket, which would include the turkey and the gravy and the cranberry sauce and the stuffing and the pie and the bread and the mashed potatoes and the sweet potatoes and the... What else? What did I leave out? The stuff you eat on Thanksgiving. And you give that to people. So everybody gets a chance. You know, the idea is if you don't have a Thanksgiving dinner, you are underprivileged. So it's something we celebrate together. So I thought, how interesting that's a celebration of temporary, relaxation of what am I trying to say? Greed is okay. It's okay to eat your stuff to beyond comfort, to stuff. You temporarily suspend ordinary restraints against too much. So the idea is to eat until you split, you know, and then you sleep it off until you might lose money on the football bets. So then you have to wake up. So anyway, page 86 is the no greed mantra, called the Veg Source mantra. It's the English language antidote to greed. And it goes, I have enough, I am grateful, share the blessings, hallelujah, praise God. May all be fed, may all things flourish, may all awaken, Bodhisvaha. Praise the Buddha. Awaken, may all awaken. So, what a different idea, right? Here it is. I have enough. Say that, and you mean it. What a different concept. I have enough, right? That's a profoundly anti-capitalist kind of concept. I have enough. I don't need a new one. Not only do I have enough, I'm grateful for what I have. I'm glad that to be able to have these blessings, to have sufficiency, makes me grateful. So not only do I have enough and not only am I grateful, but I'd like to share some of what I have. Maybe somebody else would benefit by my letting go of some of my abundance and sharing with people. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. Praise God, which is a wonderful sound of praise. Nobody's unhappy when they say hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhisvaha. Hail the awakening. So here we go. Join me if you want to recite a mantra to counter greed. I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhisvaha. Here we go. I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhisvaha. Now you have to do a mantra 3 times or 7 times or 9 times or 21 times. So, or 108 times. Do it 108 times. How much time have you got? No, okay. Let's do it 3 times. Here we go. I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhisvaha. We changed the pitch of that. It used to be here, and this is a better strummer when it's here. This is, you've heard it in G. It goes like this, which sounds better on the guitar. It's got more oomph, but it puts the voice too high. You wind up going, I have enough. And everybody goes, it's straining. Please drop the pitch of that song. So we put it up to D, and it changes the tune. It changes the feeling too. Dee, 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 dee. But I think it allows us to sing it. So there we go. That's the Veg Source mantra. And every year at this time, we can recite that and see if it doesn't change the Thanksgiving atmosphere. You've got feathers, you've got fins, you're a brother to me. You've got fur and you've got wings, you're a sister with me. Every burger had a mother, no more creatures should die. Why do we act like goblins? No more creatures must die. You love life and you love kin, you're related to me. And the skin you were born in, you're related to me. When I think of the meat I've eaten, no more creatures must die. See the faces of the life I've taken, no more creatures must die. You got feathers, you got fins, you're related to me. You got fur and you got wings, you're related to me. For every dinner, every day, no more creatures must die. Billions killed in the cruelest way, no more creatures must die. You love life and you love kin, you're related to me. And the skin you were born in, you're related to me. I want no faces on my dinner plate, no more creatures should die. No eyes look back with fear and hate, no more creatures should die. You got feathers, you got fins, You're related to me. You got fur and you got wings. You're related to me. The calf can hear his mother cry. They're related to me. Does she know they're about to die? They're related to me. They love life and they love kin. They're related to me. We love the skins we were born in. You're related to me.